It is the worst kept secret in the NBA right now that the Chicago Bulls and Zach Lavine are not only interested in parting ways with each other, but they both know it's in their best interest to not be together by the end of the season and by the time that the trade deadline occurs here in a few months. The problem for the Chicago Bulls is Zach Lavine has expressed that very intensely on the court and off the court. Everybody has already seen the video of him walking off the court, basically storming off the court after a win a few weeks ago, maybe even close to a month ago now. The Chicago Bulls team is 5-14 this year. They had a losing record last year, and up until the point 2 years ago, when Lonzo Ball was still playing for this team and they were 30-10, 30-11, somewhere around there, they have had a very terrible record since then. And to say that Zach Lavine should be exempt from it is, to a point, unfair to the Chicago Bulls. Because defensively, Zach Lavine is one of the worst defenders on this team, if not the worst of the main rotation players, and especially in the starting lineup. Now, are there other defensive players on this team who defensively are not good? Yes, but Zach Lavine is one of those guys that it's very glaring. And especially now, I think it's easier to see it in a guy who is upset that he's playing poor defense because he's probably trying to play poor defense less than just not trying at all. But regardless, it's at the point where the situation is kind of toxic now. And the situation in Chicago has been toxic since the beginning of the season. They were having players-only meetings before the season really even got underway after the first game of the year. And so it's like, they're losing by 30 points to the Boston Celtics a couple of days ago in one of the in-season tournament games. And they just don't really show any sort of ability to get out of this hole that they're in. And that hole is probably as the worst team in the NBA if you're really looking at it. You can say the Hornets, you can say maybe even the Spurs, you can say maybe the Utah Jazz, but I would think all of those teams I just mentioned have a young superstar. They don't just have a superstar, they have a young superstar. Charlotte has LaMelo Ball, even though he's injured. Utah, they don't have a young superstar, I guess. Lauri Markkanen is on the verge of just... He's emerged as a star, I would say. And Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio, he's not a superstar yet, but he has already emerged as a top 7 center in the NBA. That's not out of the realm of possibility, right? So, what do they do with Zach Lavine? There's already so many people saying, well, the Lakers are going to get Zach Lavine. That would make him happy. He's a West Coast kid. He's from Washington State. Even though I don't really think it makes sense to say he's going to be closer to home when he's from Washington State. It's not like being in LA is anywhere close to where he's from. But it doesn't make sense for LA to do that, and it doesn't make sense for Chicago to do it. You look at what Chicago gave up to get Zach Lavine. I believe he came over with Jimmy Butler in that trade a few years ago. You look at what Chicago gave up to get Jimmy, or not to get Jimmy Butler, but to get Zach Lavine. They gave up Jimmy Butler. They gave up, I believe, some picks. I mean, at the end of the day, at this point, Chicago can't just give Zach Lavine to the LA Lakers for what? We're going to get Max Christie and Taurean Prince and a 2025 or 2027 first round pick, whichever one it is that LA still has, that's going to be in the 18 to 30 range. This isn't James Harden that the Chicago Bulls are trading. This isn't Russell Westbrook. This isn't anybody like that. This is Zach Lavine. I think this is a guy who can still be saved. And if he is in the situation he likes, he will put forth a little bit more effort, and he'll be conducive to a winning team. So who needs a Zach Lavine? LA doesn't need a Zach Lavine. They don't have enough basketballs for Zach Lavine, LeBron James, Austin Reeves, and Anthony Davis to be all on the floor together. Throw in D'Angelo Russell, it would never work. So you think to yourself, who's like a guard away and who already has a defensive presence in tow to say we could take a Zach Lavine who, if he just becomes average defensively, he really increases our chances of winning a championship because of what he can do on offense. And who has a disgruntled star themselves at the moment, who probably needs a change of scenery as well. Why isn't that the New York Knicks? And why isn't that Julius Randle? I mean, if we really think about it with the Knicks, I think they're the perfect team to take on a Zach Lavine. A lot of people say the Orlando Magic, they don't need Zach Lavine. They need to figure out who they can actually play for the next 2 to 3 years, because they have it figured out with Banchero. They have it figured out with Franz Wagner. They probably have it figured out with Anthony Black going forward in the next few years that he's going to play. Suggs, Cole, like they need to figure out who they're not going to play before they figure out who to add to their roster, because I think they got 12 guys right now that can play. The Knicks have like 7, 8, and a couple of them, like, you really can only count on for half of those games. Like Josh Hart, he's great. Defensively, rebounding-wise, he'll be there 75% of the games. But those 25% of the games where defensively and rebounding-wise, he's, it's minuscule. His offense isn't there either. He's not a playmaker. He's not a great shooter. He's average to, honestly, below average when you compare him to the rest of this league. You can replace Josh Hart with a Zach Lavine. And you can especially replace Julius Randle with a Zach Lavine. And I think that's something that, man, this New York Knicks team, I think they're so tired of this Julius Randle get at the high post and get 18 points on 20 shots. I think they're so tired of it. I think they're so tired of it now that RJ Barrett is playing well. And I know that that's a piece of this that people would say, well, Zach Lavine doesn't fit in New York because they have RJ Barrett. Zach Lavine fits perfectly into this team because of the fact that they have RJ Barrett. Because now, like I said, there's not 20 possessions a game where Julius Randle gets the ball at the high post for 17 seconds of the shot clock and just sits there. Jab step, jab step, jab step. All right, I'm going to drive right, I'm going to spin in. Or I'm going to drive left, I'm going to spin in. Like, I think they're so tired of it. And I know Thibodeau's not going to say it because, for better or worse, Thibodeau has not said a lot about Julius Randle with the offense that Julius Randle provides since he got there. And I say for better or for worse, I think it's for worse. And, last year it was weird with Julius Randle in New York. It's kind of been weird this year. And New York has been able to hold the fort until Julius Randle figures it out. Jalen Brunson has done his thing. Like I said, RJ Barrett has been doing well. Mitchell Robinson, I haven't checked Mitchell Robinson in the last few days, but Mitchell Robinson doesn't foul out of 85% of his games anymore. He's only Mitchell Robinson averaging 1.8 fouls a game. That's incredible. That is incredible for where he was previous years. That almost puts him in the most improved player category. But you look at this team, like, the fact that they're the 29th team in pace this year is because of Julius Randle. The fact that they're 26th in points per game this year, I'm not going to say is only because of Julius Randle, but I'm going to tell you it's not a positive from Julius Randle. Like I said, Jalen Brunson and RJ Barrett this year have taken it to another level from where they were previously. And they would get smaller making this trade. They would. But they can play someone else. And that gives them another offensive threat to where it's not a 27.5% three-point shooter who's taking 6 threes a game. It's not a sub 40% field goal percent shooter who shoots 17 shots a game. Julius Randle is the only player on this team, outside of Evan Fournier, who doesn't count, who has an effective field goal percentage that is sub 50%. He rebounds like crazy. He gets 5 assists a game. He also turns it over 3 times a game, highest on the team. He scores 20 points a game. He needs to take 17 shots to do it. And he's disgruntled. We've seen it. We have seen it. And just to go along with it, Zach Lavine in New York, I think that's a lot more fun for New York fans than it is Julius Randle. I really do. And I think if you're looking at it, Julius Randle hasn't taken that next step as the leader of a team. And I think there's this thing where it's like a back and forth between Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson. And Julius thinks he still is the guy because he was there before Jalen Brunson. But no, Jalen Brunson's the man. And I know Zach Lavine has having issues in Chicago because he wants to be the man. But I think if you put him in New York, I think if you put him with Tom Thibodeau and Jalen Brunson and RJ Barrett, you have a 3-headed monster in the backcourt with those 3. You have Mitchell Robinson underneath. You still would have probably Emmanuel Quickly, because I think if you're looking at this from Chicago's perspective, what more are you asking for? You get a big man who, on Chicago's roster, you don't have that forward presence really other than DeMar DeRozan. And that's the part where it would get tricky with the Bulls, is because they already have a guy who's going to get the ball in the mid-range area and take 17 shots a game. But it makes a little bit more sense to have Julius Randle than it does Zach Lavine, because Zach Lavine needs the ball probably more than DeMar DeRozan does. I think at this point we understand the DeMar DeRozan player type doesn't fit to winning basketball anymore. It doesn't fit to have a guy take 17 shots a game and he makes less than 1 3 a game. It doesn't fit anymore. It just doesn't. And with the rest of this team, they're one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the NBA. And Zach Lavine is not the reason why. And it's just, it seems perfect to me. It seems perfect to me. It really does. Because both of these guys need a change. And both of these guys need to be on a better fit for them with the rest of their teammates. And just where they are now, they're not happy. And I think it's an easy enough trade to go 1 for 1. The Bulls get Julius Randle, and the New York Knicks get Zach Lavine. I think it's that perfect of a situation.